The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, struggling economically and diplomatically, has no intention of voluntarily disconnecting from the world. After the CCP's 20th National Congress ended in October, it has emphasized its intention to keep its doors open on various occasions. On November 4, 2022, a major international exhibition opened in Shanghai. The event was pegged as an attempt by Beijing to convey the message of openness to the world. At the Expo's opening ceremony, CCP leader Xi Jinping said in a video message that he wants to expand opening up and make China's big market a big opportunity for the world.
路就在脚下.
The path is right under our feet, and the bright future is just ahead of us. China is willing to work together with all countries to practice true multilateralism, build more consensus on opening up, and jointly overcome the difficulties and challenges confronting global economic growth, so that opening up will bring a new bright future for global development.
带来新的光明前程.
Opening up is where the charm of the CIIE lies and makes a hope for global economic recovery and development. According to the report of the 20th National Congress of the CPC, China will adhere to the basic state policy of opening up and firmly pursue an open strategy of mutual benefit and win-win cooperation. In the future, China's door of opening up will only open wider. Let's all wish this year's CIIE a complete success. However, an unexpected political accident occurred before the Expo even started. On November 2nd, SAIC-GM, China's automaker and also a joint venture with GM, launched a new Buick vehicle. The new model was advertised on its website as having very comfortable chairs. It reads, "You are invited to sit in this chair that you would not want to get off." The authorities saw the tagline, "A chair you won't want to get off," as an allusion to Xi Jinping and a political accident. It's because Xi was re-elected as the top party leader for the third time by breaking the party's rules and customs at the 20th National Congress. Also, because he hasn't chosen a successor, he is seen as having the intention of staying in his position as top leader for as long as he likes. This does fit with the advertisement. The ad has now been taken down and banned from the entire net in China. As it's risen to a political height, not only have all publicity activities related to Buick been cancelled at the Expo, but SAIC's party committee and publicity department are also said to have been interrogated overnight, presumably to find out whether it's intentional or unintentional. The impact of blocking Buick is huge. It will give GM, the US business community, and the world a real sense of the inconsistency of Beijing's actions and words. How can it be said to be truly open when they are so sensitive to clamp down because of a mere advertising phrase? After the CCP concluded its 20th Congress, the Beijing government should have tried to invite quite a number of heads of state to visit China as a gesture of keeping an open attitude towards the outside world. However, in the end, only 4 of them made the trip. Apart from Germany, the rest were Vietnam, Pakistan, and Tanzania. The first one to visit China was the Vietnamese General Secretary. The visit was the most publicized by the CCP, and he was addressed as a comrade plus brother. The traditional friendship between Vietnam and China was praised by the Chinese media. Vietnam's biggest security concern is China, and the dispute between the two sides in the South China Sea remains unresolved, with Vietnam openly inviting the US to intervene. The Vietnamese Communist Party knows it's weak and dares not offend the CCP. At the same time, it needs the US to counterbalance the CCP, thus playing a seesaw between the US and China. The U.S. supply chain, including the supply chain of Taiwanese businessmen, is continuously transferred from mainland China to Vietnam. This is like a pie falling from the sky for Vietnam, making it all the more necessary to strike a balance between the U.S. and China. The Beijing government should be quite unhappy, but it has to pretend to be a comrade and brother with Vietnam, because if Vietnam completely falls to the U.S., it will be even worse for Beijing. Party media continues to claim that China and Pakistan are ironclad. The CCP needs Pakistan to keep India in check, and Pakistan needs to use China to fight India. Pakistan knows that Beijing needs a show at this time, so it's willing to participate and cooperate, but will need more money from the CCP, naturally. Tanzania is in even greater need of CCP money. Xinhua said the first African country Xi Jinping visited after becoming president in 2013 was Tanzania, adding that Tanzanian President Hassan's visit to China after the 20th Communist Party Congress showed the importance of China-Africa relations in the overall diplomatic picture. In reality, the US and Britain are also major aid donors to Tanzania. Africa's vote at the UN has been a big help to Beijing in international affairs in the past. Now the CCP needs Africa's vote at the UN even more to hold things together. Xinhua says that back then China tightened its belt to help its African brothers build the Tanzanian railway when it was still poor itself. The only real highlight of the diplomatic visits was the German Chancellor's visit. On November 5th, China's state news agency Xinhua published an article titled, "Within a week, General Secretary Xi Jinping met intensively with 4 foreign leaders." Over the last 3 decades, the official Chinese media has often used terms like great power diplomacy, head of the state diplomacy, leading the world, and pointing out the direction of the world's development in their coverage of foreign affairs. But today, there isn't a chance for them to be used again. It can be said that the CCP didn't get the expected a house full of distinguished visitors, and the new CCP top brass probably is feeling the chill of international alienation. The 4 heads of state have different purposes for visiting China, and the CCP knows that it's difficult for them to follow the CCP in opposing the US, so they did everything they could to keep them entertained. Otherwise, no one would have visited. So, did the German Chancellor get the deal he wanted from Beijing? Scholz's visit to China on November 4th made him the first G7 leader to visit China since the COVID-19 outbreak and the first Western leader to meet with the CCP leader Xi Jinping since he consolidated power at the 20th National Congress. His visit to China was closely watched by the international community against a backdrop where relations between Western societies and the CCP are in general decline. Playing divisive tactics between the US and Europe has been a long-standing strategy of the CCP, but it has been rapidly failing over the past 3 years. Thus, this visit by the German Chancellor should be seen as a lifesaver by the CCP. Germany and China are closely linked economically, with China becoming Germany's largest single trading partner in 2016, and a recent survey by the IFO think tank found that nearly half of German industrial companies now rely on significant Chinese investment. On November 3rd, the front page of the German government's website displayed a big headline, "We don't want to decouple from China, but we can't be overly dependent." The statement also said that Scholz was traveling to Beijing in his capacity as German federal chancellor and wasn't speaking on behalf of Europe as a whole. This underlines Scholz's pragmatic and balanced style.
Insofern ist es gut, dass wir einen ganz intensiven
In that respect, it's good that we will have a very intensive exchange on all the issues we want to and can discuss in regard to our bilateral relations the possibilities to further intensify economic cooperation as well as, of course, the issues where we pursue different perspectives. That's the goal of a good exchange, and I'm delighted that this is possible together here today.
Und ich bin sehr froh, dass das heute jetzt hier miteinander möglich ist.
On November 4th, Scholz, under intense pressure from his allies, was in Beijing and publicly raised the issues of the Russian-Ukrainian war, human rights, Chinese market barriers, and intellectual property rights with the CCP.
Menschenrechte sind in ihrer Gültigkeit universell.
Human rights are universal. This goes for individual citizens and the right to freedom, just like for economic, social, and cultural rights. And it applies especially to the protection of minorities' rights. All members of the United Nations have agreed to that. A reminder of this agreement and a call to implement these rights, for example in Xinjiang province, is therefore not an interference in domestic affairs. As our discussions have shown, there are differences between our two countries. The Prime Minister already spoke about it. For me, it was important to present our position.
Mir war es wichtig, unsere Überzeugung klarzustellen.
The 12 German business executives who accompanied Scholz on his visit to China were also the focus of Chinese media coverage. These included the chief executives of German companies such as Volkswagen, Siemens, and German chemical giants BASF and BioNTech. On the surface, Scholz achieved two major material gains. The first is the purchase of 140 aircraft by the state-owned China National Aviation Equipment Corporation from Airbus SE, a joint venture between France, Germany, Spain, and the UK. The deal is worth about US $17 billion. Previously, in July, Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern Airlines had announced orders worth more than US $37 billion to Airbus SE. In reality, the Chinese civil aviation industry continues to be under pressure. According to official sources, since the outbreak, China's civil aviation industry has suffered cumulative losses of nearly 300 billion RMB, or more than US 40 billion, with losses of more than US 15 billion in the first half of 2022 alone, and another 12 airlines in insolvency. Second, Beijing agreed to approve the BioNTech vaccine for foreigners living in China. However, this is a very small concession, and the German vaccine is still out of reach for mainland Chinese. On the policy level, Scholz made a gain. Xi Jinping has warned Putin not to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. A Xinhua news agency release describes it this way. Xi Jinping expressed his common opposition to the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons, advocated that nuclear weapons should not be used and nuclear war should not be fought, and a nuclear crisis in Asia and Europe should be prevented. However, no progress has been made on the front that Scholz has longed for, which is the CCP exerting pressure on Russia to end the Russo-Ukrainian war as soon as possible. Scholz expressed Germany's two main positions to the CCP. First, a leveled playing field. He said, German companies should not encounter great difficulties in China than Chinese companies do in Europe. I believe that this will lead to progress in many concrete cases in the near future. He added that this involves not only German companies but also European companies. Secondly, he reiterated his commitment to the One China policy. Today, I addressed our increasing concern over stability and peace in the region. China has a special responsibility here. We pursue a One China policy like the US and many other countries. At the same time, I have made it clear that any change to Taiwan's status quo must be peaceful or by mutual agreement. As for the second point on Taiwan, whether the CCP will heed Scholz's advice is not for the Germans to decide. Returning to the first point, which is of great concern to both sides, there are signs that the Communist Party has reached a point where it's making a drastic shift to the left to deal with domestic and international crises. 3 years of insistence on an extreme zero-COVID policy has resulted in an unprecedented isolation of China and a serious supply chain disruption. In the future, the CCP will rely primarily on internal circulation to deal with external pressure. Frankly, expectations that there will be free trade in the Chinese market and that the CCP will protect intellectual property rights are naive. If the CCP doesn't give freedom to its own private companies, will it give it to foreign companies? While the US is imposing a technology ban on the CCP, German companies have taken the initiative to bring the technologies to the CCP's doorstep this time around. It looks like Germany would have to be taught another lesson. One visible clue as to the price Germany will pay is the offer made by China COSCO last year to acquire a 35% stake in the port of Hamburg operated by logistics company HHLA. On the eve of the trip to China, Scholz approved the sale of a 24.9% stake in the port of Hamburg to COSCO despite opposition from the coalition parties, the Greens and the FDP, because by pushing the stake down below 25%, the deal no longer needed cabinet approval, bypassing opposition from the Greens and FDP.
The Chancellor himself has spoken on this issue and has made it very clear that it is not about a sale of parts of the port of Hamburg, but only about a stake in a single terminal. And the 24.9% maximum rule ensures that there is no strategic control or strategic participation whatsoever, but only a silent participation.
Reuters reported on November 2nd that a senior State Department official said the U.S. warned Germany not to allow China to gain a controlling stake in Hamburg's port terminal, a deal that is being measured as to how tough Germany is on Beijing. Another official added that it was important to ensure that the city of Hamburg and the port itself controlled the vast majority of shares. It's very important for the standards we set in the G7 countries and the world against China, said the official. Beijing, of course, is very unhappy about this. Pragmatic cooperation between China and Germany is a matter for the two sovereign countries. The U.S. should not attack it without reason and has no right to meddle and interfere. U.S. officials are complacent about interfering in the affairs of other countries, including so-called partner countries, which fully exposes their consistent hegemonic mentality and vices of coercive diplomacy. Scholz's first meeting with the Communist Party leader showed that he was overly balanced and did not have enough aggressiveness. Instead of effectively conveying the multiple pressures from the Western community to the CCP to gain a favorable negotiating position for himself, Scholz ended up carrying all the pressure himself. The German nation is rationally inclined, and Scholz's experience may positively impact the new German strategy toward China, which is expected to be announced next year. According to German media, at the time of Scholz's visit to China, a German poll showed that only 9% of Germans considered China to be a trustworthy partner, compared to 36% 5 years ago. The poll shows that Germans' distrust of China is close to that of Russia. Only 10% of Germans currently consider Russia trustworthy. Almost simultaneously with Scholz's visit to China, a meeting of foreign ministers of the industrialized G7 countries is taking place in a small German town. Before the meeting, the German foreign minister of the Green Party said the G7 is ready to position China as a competitor and an opponent. The G7 foreign ministers meeting comes more than 8 months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and after Chinese President Xi Jinping's declaration of the 20th Communist Party Congress that he will never commit to renouncing the use of force, posing a major challenge to the international order and security in the Taiwan Strait. The joint statement issued after the meeting focused on the war between Russia and Ukraine. It also encouraged the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues in the Taiwan Strait and reminded China that it should uphold the principles of the UN Charter on the peaceful settlement of disputes, avoiding threats, intimidation, and the use of force. It strongly opposed any attempt to unilaterally change the status quo by force or coercion. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of China welcomed the statement's content and thanked the G7 member states for their firm support in maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait and for Taiwan. The CCP embraces ideologies that run counter to universal values. Its actions are destroying the credibility of China, an ancient nation with several thousand years of civilization. The international community has reacted to the CCP's major conferences with even more negativity, and most countries looking on with indifference. The isolation of the CCP is no longer easy to change, and the global siege of the Communist Party has become an international trend.